So this question is about positions of items on a map, and it's talking about a bridge and so forth. The first part of the question says measure and write down the bearing of B from F. Well, the key thing we've got to remember, the key word there is bearing. So we have to remember bearings are the measure of an angle where you start by facing north and you always turn in a clockwise direction, and whatever the angle of turn is, then that becomes the bearing. So if this was, say, 45 degrees as a turn, then we must remember that our bearings have 3 digits. So bearings have 3 digits. That's everywhere in the world we all do the same thing. So the final answer here would be 0.45 degrees. 3 digits. Only got 45 degree turn on the angle. So the bearing gets the extra 0 to make it have 3 digits. The other important thing to remember is that you'll always be stood somewhere, and the word from tells you where you stood to do the measuring of the angle when you're facing north to start with. So this question says measure and write down the bearing of B from F. So that means we've got to remember that we're kind of stood here and we're going to be measuring this angle of turn from facing north first, and then so we get our protractor, and we've got to remember that north is always the 3 digits 0, 0, 0 as a bearing. So in other words, we must line our protractor up so that the 0 on our protractor is facing north, and the centre of the protractor is where the cross is, and we then measure that angle of turn. So the 0 is on the outside scale, so we come round, and we always count up with angles when we're measuring anyway, because we're turning, so 10, 20, 30, 40. So we end up with 76 and a bit, so nearest number 76. So that's a turn of 76 degrees, but it's a bearing, so we must remember to put a 0 there because we need 3 digits. So 0, 76 degrees. The next part of the question says a church is somewhere on a bearing of 155 from the bridge. So we're now stood at this position, and it's 5 centimeters from B on this map. So 155 degrees, again, key thing, we line our protractor with the centre at B, because that's where the from bit. Our 0 is on the outside again, and it was a bearing of 155 degrees. So 10, 20, 30 come around the outside scale until we get to 155. So we put a dot down to show that's the angle measure, and then we get our ruler and line up from B through the 155 degree turn, and it says it's 5 centimeters. So we draw 5 centimeters, making sure our 0 on our ruler is lined up where B is, coming down to 5 centimeters, make the mark, and it says label it C. So the question said label it C. So we've got to make sure that we actually just do what the exam board wants, which is label it C. And that's a summary of bearings. The key things being that you always look to measure from somewhere, so you put your protractor where the from bit is. Measure an angle of turn starting with 0 at north, facing north. Whatever that angle is the bearing. If it's not got 3 digits, then we put a 0 in front to make it 3 digits. So that's a summary of doing a bearings question.